Hello everyone and welcome to another video. My name is Giuseppe Improta and today we talk about color spaces and color management. A lot of you guys have asked me to make a video about ACES to follow up from my first color management video that I did long time ago. And I will do that, but before we get into the specificity of ACES and how to use that, I wanted to make a general video to highlight a little bit the overall process that is that of defining color spaces and handling color management, because it feels like a lot of people don't actually have this concept clear, and it's something that all my students struggle with as well. Okay, number one, why do we need color management and color spaces? The reason is that not everything sees things the same way. And what do I mean with that? Even if you take people like us and you take 10 different individuals, it's very likely that they will have different characteristics in terms of how they see things. In particular, some people can see colors differently from others, and some people can see sharper than other people, or some people cannot even see properly, like myself, and so you need eyeglasses for that. So how do we solve this problem? We define basically a standard that everybody has to adhere to. A standard of colors, a standard of numbers, so a description, an objective description of what colors have to be. Now, this problem is not just a problem that is relative to human beings, because every device utilizes different tech and different sensors that creates a lot of variations in how these colors are captured and interpreted by the software and all basically the technology that, for example, cameras have. Okay, so the problem here is that every manufacturer, every camera, every scanner, every single thing that captures colors can capture those colors in a different way. So how do we make all these different devices, especially in today's world where there are so many different brands and models and formats and everything? How do we make all of these into one basically standard? And that's what color management is, and color profiles, color spaces come into helping this process. Let's start dividing the problem into three steps. Number one, there is a capture problem. The second problem is the editing problem. And the third problem is the distribution problem. And once you understand these three steps of the content creation process, you will understand a little bit better why do we need these color spaces and color management. Okay, so capturing. Say that we have three different cameras, we have three different sensors, we have three different lenses, different brands of lenses possibly. Everything is different. So these cameras will not have the same exact color science or color technology, if you want to call it that way. This is because how we capture colors and how these colors are elaborated by the processor that is inside the camera and through the file format that each camera utilizes, is also part of why a camera is better than another. If you take Arris cameras, for example, they have a very specific way of capturing highlights, of capturing details, a very cinematic way, we would like to say, that distinguishes them from any other camera on the market. So would they just release their technology out for free? No, they won't, because that is one feature why we buy those cameras and we use those cameras for these big blockbuster movies. Okay, so this is the thing that you have to understand. This is part of the advantage that a company has over other companies: the color science, the color accuracy, and also the compression technology. So how efficient a file format or data transfer is in this kind of technologies. Okay, so when we capture something, now we don't have to constrain this to just cameras, because everything that captures requires a sensor of some sort. So even if I put a paper in the scanner, every scanner is different. Three different scanners will give us different results. Now, how different depends obviously on the technology of the scanner, but there can be even big differences in between them. And the same problem happens. So each scanner has a different set of colors and interprets those colors differently. So we have a big differences when we actually put all these files together. Now, in the case of a scanner, the problem is not that big because maybe you use one scanner to acquire a bunch of different images. But if we are talking about the video production and we are shooting with multiple cameras, multiple brands and multiple lenses, you can understand that the disparity in colors and technology can become a big deal. And so we need tools to sort of put everything together under one standard, under one definition of what is red, what is green, and what is blue, so that nobody goes too crazy, though we still go crazy a lot of times with this stuff. Okay, so this is the capturing phase. So how do we transition from the first step, which is capturing, onto the second step, which is editing? We need something to connect these two things, right? And what connects the two things really is the third thing, which is the distribution. Everything that we work on in terms of creative projects has to end up somewhere, right? If I take a picture, that picture can end up on the web, on internet, or I can print it. If I take a short, I shoot a short movie, that can go on YouTube, but it can also go in a theater for a film festival, for example. If I'm shooting a blockbuster, yes, it will go in the theater first, but then we'll have to be distributors also on Netflix, for example, or on streaming platform. So what that means is that everything that we do has to be defined in terms of colors, elaboration, and editing by a standard which is defined by the output. What color management is giving us a preview of how the colors will look like on the output on the final device without changing the data that we have captured. So why do we need this preview? Why can't we just convert the colors into whatever format we need at the end, at the output? The reason is that it's not smart in today's workflow to convert and destroy the data. A lot of times the outputs that we watch our products on are not as extended in terms of accuracy and color quality in general compared to the material that we have acquired. And there is another problem, which is in today's world, we usually need a product to have multiple outputs. So for example, I can create a movie that goes in the theater, but then this movie can go onto Netflix, but then this can be also in SDR, standard definition, or high definition, so in HDR. Okay, so the problems there are multiple, and essentially it all has to do with where this stuff is gonna end up. There is not one way of seeing things. There is not one output. If there was only one TV and one standard where everybody watched all these things that we create, probably this problem would be less important. But because that's not the case, and we push the technology so much back and forth with incredible resolutions and extended color ranges, and now with the HDR and all this fancy technology, now we need a more flexible way of working. So that if I record with my cameras and I have a lot of data, more data than what I can actually finally output in a theater or even at home on a Netflix show or even in HDR, do I really want to destroy the data in the process of elaborating all this content for the output? Probably not. And the reason is that, maybe 5-10 years from now, there is gonna be some media, some new devices that allow us to use that data, and so we can just go back, pick that data, re-elaborate it again, and then output with a new device. Now, maybe at that time, what we have shot in the past might not be relevant and nobody will give a crap about it. But the idea here is that we don't want to destroy the data we have captured just because we have to elaborate for an output that has less quality. Okay, so this is what color management is. Now, extended this concept to a working environment, you have to also understand that if I have 20 monitors in a room, these 20 monitors might display colors differently, might have different levels of brightness. And so the first thing that we do in a professional environment is that we calibrate these monitors. When I say calibrate these monitors, it means that there is a standard that these monitors have to respond to, so that their red, green, and blue colors and the brightness level are established and they are the same for every monitor, so that to the limit of their own vision, the people that work on those monitors will all see the same thing. And of course, if there is a projector involved into these kind of reviews, and if there is a streaming process because people maybe are overseas or maybe they're working from home, all these has to work seamless. So we have multiple problems, but it's still a problem of capturing, editing, and finally output. So you don't have to strictly think in terms of cameras or cinematography or photography to apply this concept, because the same happens when you are doing graphic design and you have to print something on a paper that is maybe not capable of displaying all the colors that your camera is captured. So for example, if I shoot with a modern camera, I can capture very incredible grades and tones of green. But most paper will not even be able to print that kind of green because they lack the brightness that is needed to print that. And so what can I do to prevent the print to be wrong? I preview that paper on Photoshop, for example, or Lightroom or wherever you are using, and I make sure that then I'm working within the limits of the paper with all the operations that I do in terms of color grading, color processing of the image. This way, I don't have to imagine or test every time a print to see how the colors are going to be, but I can actually just preview the image in my Photoshop file. And I still have the original file that has all the colors preserved and all the data preserved, so that when tomorrow Epson or Canon come up with a new paper that maybe can reach that kind of brightness, or a new printer that has that kind of capabilities, my image is not wasted. I still have it, and then I can print it. And I don't have to worry about having discarded all the colors just because now, in this day and age, I don't have the means to print that. Your editing part of this process is all adjusted based on your output. So now every kind of industry has their own preferences. And so, for example, you will see that today's standards in terms of web and internet and general image and video sharing is the sRGB color space. Color spaces are not this fancy thing. They're just a group of colors that define basically what is allowed and what is not allowed in terms of tones and shades within the color space. Some of these standards have to change in time, because as the time goes by, now we can capture and record so much more information than ever before, right? So this sRGB, which is the standard for internet and in general sharing, image sharing, it's a little bit of a crappy color space. And it's about time that it goes away, because it literally does not have enough shades, enough colors to preserve the quality that the photograph even needs to have. So why do we have sRGB? Well, it's a legacy, because before the monitors could not even display a full sRGB. Some monitors could, but you had to basically buy this professional monitor that were able to. And so you would have those monitors calibrated, and then you can have all the spectrum of sRGB. But then what happened is that now we have wider gamut. If you don't know what gamut is, I made a video on that, so go watch the previous video about color management and color spaces. But essentially, the gamut of a device is how many colors that device is able to reproduce. It's like having a box of pencils. If you have 36 pencils, you can reproduce more colors than 24, and so forth and so on. So now that we have wider gamuts, now we need wider color spaces, because those groups of colors that we had put into the sRGB is just not holding up anymore. So Adobe RGB has never really taken off in terms of substituting sRGB. I'm not sure why, but it's been mostly used into the photography field. But now we have, for example, this DCI-P3, which is the color space that was used for the longest time into the theaters, which is becoming more and more popular, and Apple is pushing it a lot, to the point that now the new iPads even have this DCI-P3 color space. And I feel that that will be the color space that we will all work on moving forward, because it's not that giant of a color space. It's still pretty limited in some ways, but is also pretty good and much better than the sRGB. And also most monitors today can display DCI-P3 to different grades of quality. Obviously, some can display 100%, some can display 70%. It depends on your monitor. It depends on the gamut of your monitor. And DCI-P3 is de facto the standard of cinematic productions. And now that we have a lot of these video contents created through YouTube and other things, it makes sense to adopt a color space that is that of cinema and theaters, right? TVs can display DCI-P3 decently well now, and so that's gonna probably replace everything else. Now there are bigger color spaces and different color spaces. For example, when we create a product for TV that is in SDR, so in standard definition, not in HDR, just to be clear, this SDR protocol, it's using a color space which is called Rec. 709. This color space defines what colors and what gamma as well, so what kind of midtones brightness we have into that kind of content, into that kind of product. Okay, so it's very important to understand that for every target there is probably a color space that is more used. So as I said, the DCI-P3 was the one that was used and is used in theaters. Rec. 709 is what is used for standard definition content. Rec. 2020 is what is used for HDR content. Now HDR content has a lot more levels of brightness. The images are a lot brighter. It's 10-bit versus 8-bit. Those 2 bits make a big difference. And so you need a different color space to define the kind of color that we have in there. And that's why we have Rec. 2020. Okay, so these are the color spaces that essentially you use to pre-visualize the output of your content. Essentially, it's like somebody puts on a pair of glasses and now you can see the content differently with the colors that you need for your output. But your capturing phase and your data is still all there. So you have now a way of pre-visualizing this content across different media to finally elaborate the output that you need. Okay, so you start with the capturing the data, you have this in between, a sort of like processing which converts these colors into what the output will be. But that conversion is only a preview. We are not converting the files into the output. We still have the files all on disk and we are still using the original file. So to make it practical, what do? You have to define the output that you need this stuff on. If you're shooting a short movie and it's only gonna go on YouTube, then you're okay with sRGB or better with Rec. 709, which is the de facto standard of standard dynamic range SDR production for TV. Okay, if you are thinking that this is gonna go to a festival or it's gonna be projected into a theater, you might want to take advantage of that extended theater projector gamut range, and so you might want to think about DCI-P3. So you capture everything in one format that you deem appropriate with enough quality, then you have this transitioning preview while you work your color grading or your colors or your composition or whatever it is, depending on what kind of creative discipline you are in. And then finally you have your output. Okay, and the output colors will match if you have done this process correctly, which is what we're gonna see in the next video. Next video, we're gonna talk about ACES, because that is something that all of you guys have asked. And ACES is just a color space that is very, very big because it's meant for an archival purpose. We hope that this clarifies a little bit what's the reasoning behind having this many color spaces and color profiles. I hope this video was useful. If so, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.